I've been having these economic thoughts lately. No particular reason. Naturally, these thoughts coalesced into a focused effort toward analyzing the economic landscape of Kingdom Hearts. Because, if you didn't know, this entire channel was formed as a defense mechanism to protect myself against the present and future, and so when faced with real-world conflict or strife, I can always retreat to the comfort of the Traverse Town First District Cafe. Or maybe not, because have you seen these prices? I want to say up top, I give credit to longtime viewer and commenter Formal Gibble for jumpstarting this idea. I was working on something else, but one Super Bowl party and a tipsy AMA later, and I ended up pivoting to this because it sounded fun. Kendrick was so good, by the way. Anyway, I wanted to hone in on the world of money in Kingdom Hearts, because most of the time, money is kind of an afterthought. I've been in very few situations where I was actually conscious of how much money I did or did not have while playing a KH game. Namely, this includes buying or trying to buy weapons for Donald and Goofy at the very start of KH1, selling a bunch of stuff to afford engine and haste gummies in the KH1 speedrun, needing to grind for money to buy commands for melding and Birth by Sleep, and the same thing except water barrels for training Dream Eaters and Dream Drop Distance. Beyond that, it's very rare that I'm all too concerned with my KH finances. I'm a bit more preoccupied with my real-life finances, and of course, you can help assuage those worries by checking out patreon.com/regularpat, but only if you really like me or the video, or both, but that's not very likely. Seamless panhandle plug aside, to answer Gibble's initial question here, I think by default I'd have to say money is most important in Birth by Sleep, or at the very least, it's the game where I most often find that I don't always have enough to do what I want to do. You've got to buy a lot of commands if you're going for that full command list, or by proxy the Platinum Trophy, and there's not great odds you'll have all the funds you need to go on the necessary shopping sprees to make that happen. I think there's also a case to be made for KH1 being up there as well, even if you're not doing a speedrun. Aside from everything being generally more expensive in the first game, which we'll get to, we can also consider the late game synthesis grind. In terms of economic differences between original releases and final mixes, KH1s are the most noticeable. This is especially relevant when looking to acquire the rare Orichalcum material, which you need 19 of to synthesize everything on the synth list and thus craft the Ultima weapon. If you played the OG release of KH1, you may recall that Orichalcums could drop from Behemoths at 20% and Invisibles at 1%. That's no longer the case in Final Mix, and instead the only renewable source of Orichalcum is purchasing them from the Duck Nephews in Traverse Town for a whopping 5,000 money apiece. Thankfully, although you need those 19 Orichalcum to craft everything, you can find 18 of them out in the worlds, whether they're in chests or given as rewards for minigames. So at minimum, you'll need to sink 5k into getting that last Orichalcum. But if you're sitting at home wondering why you threw away 15k or more in your most recent synth grind, there's a good chance you missed something like the hourly doors at the clock tower, which give out 2 Orichalcum. Of course, your in-game time needs to start with specific numbers for these doors to be accessible, so I wouldn't blame you for missing out on these guys. Point being, it's not super difficult to run into this late-game money crisis in KH1, especially if you aren't grabbing every treasure chest and you're skipping optional encounters. Ironically, I never found myself too worried about how much money I had in KH2, despite the game literally putting you through a segment where you're broke as fuck and need to do odd jobs to afford train tickets. And to be honest, that's probably the height of money consciousness in KH2. If you're really concerned about getting that +2 AP bonus, you should grind out that 1200 money, although I basically never have the patience to deliver mail to these birds 24 times, and that's only if you're perfect at it, which I am, but still. I guess I should also point out, because some people don't know, you don't actually have to collect all the money that the game prompts you to. You can just be a lazy fuck and do one job and then show up at the train station and everyone else will accommodate you. I know this is probably obvious to most of you watching, but I don't know, man. I've sat next to regular GF as she scrolled by several TikToks that point out how you can freeze the bubbles in Hollow Bastion, and it makes me want to jump out a window every time. Thousands of views and comments, like, how do I get these people to watch a regular Pat video? What kind of campaign do I need to run? There's that pesky real-world economy again, let's get out of here. As mentioned, Dream Drop does often necessitate the use of training tools, specifically water barrels, to squeeze every last drop of utility and, I guess, affection out of your Technicolor companions. So you might occasionally catch me selling off all of the junk commands I don't use so I can afford toys for my kids, because I'm a good parent, despite what the DDD Nuzlocke footage might lead you to believe. As for KH3, I was a bit harder pressed to think of an occasion where I needed to buy stuff but couldn't afford it. That could be by virtue of money being more plentiful. I mean, it's literally just laying on the floor in the Caribbean, but it's equally likely that since the game is, for the most part, much easier than its 2 numbered predecessors, you're not going to really find it as necessary to sink money into a bunch of buff items. Because in reality, KH3 has more stuff to spend money on, yet I don't often find myself hurting for cash. You've got your usual healing items, armor, accessories, D&G weapons, synth materials, gummies, if you're into that, the new gotta have one at all times Kupo coin, which is way too cheap for what it is, and even cuisine ingredients or whole meals also being sold at ridiculous everyday low prices, because that's the Moogle promise, Kupo. The one reason I could really see you needing to money grind in KH3 is stocking up on elixirs for late game stuff during a challenge run or the data fights, because they're sold at a chunky $4 grand a pop, which is the series record. But as a wallet-friendly alternative, you can just get good and save 400 on that Kupo coin while you're at it. This unsolicited dick-headed advice was brought to you by a man who absolutely grinded for elixir money on his level 1 run. And I know some of you are saying to your screen, very politely and also at a reasonable volume, but Pat, money is also the primary currency in Recoded. And I say back, not as politely, but still at a reasonable volume, you're gonna have to find someone who gives a shit. Is Recoded money an object in the sense that we've discussed it today? Beast the struggle balls out of me. I played the game twice and couldn't tell you if I was ever strapped for cash or not. I'm assuming not often, because I made a beeline for the credits upon startup both times I played. We'll talk a bit more about Recoded today though, don't you worry. Or do worry, if you're me. Now, it should be pointed out that money is not the only centralized currency throughout Kingdom Hearts. In Chain of Memories, money is completely absent and is instead replaced by Moogle points. In 358 Days, it's there, but only as a supplement to the organization-exclusive Heart Points. Don't ask me how Heart Points work or what Gulmex the Moogle is going to do with them, because I got no clue. Because I don't think we're dealing with tangible, holdable hearts here. I mean, upon being released, they fly away and join Xemnas' Kingdom Hearts. And we also know that Heart Points aren't one-for-one with the total number of hearts you manage to harvest, because killing one Heartless often nets you multiple Heart Points, and you can get even more points by triggering chains. So I sort of conceptualize Heart Points as like a credit system. It's just numbers that you trade for goods, which is what all money is, but it feels especially fake when you put it that way. Xemnas or Cyax or whoever's in charge of bookkeeping, but let's be real, it's Cyax, despite Zexian's proclivities, he has to also maintain an organization economy, or I guess an economy solely centered on Roxas and Xion, as they're the only ones producing hearts. So when Roxas comes home and reports how many hearts he captured, that gets marked down on some sort of Excel sheet, and I don't know why it really behooves Cyax to award more heart points when Roxas defeats several Heartless in quick succession, but he does it all the same because it's his job, and it's actually really important. This all also implies that some hearts are just inherently way more valuable than others, or at least the organization suspects them to be, because Roxas is awarded more heart points for killing more fearsome enemies. For example, a soldier is worth 16, a clay armor is worth 43, and the ruler of the sky is a hefty 99. So it would seem focusing on killing a bunch of big guys would really expedite the process of creating an artificial Kingdom Hearts. Regardless, Roxas harvests hearts, Cyax awards heart points, the points are exchanged for equipment to aid in further heart collection, the Wheel of Fortune spins round and round. Mind you, this currency system that the organization made up exists alongside a pre-established money economy. In fairness, the Moogle is on their turf, so it's gotta play by house rules. Heart points are very much the primary units of purchasing power in the castle, whether you're buying item panels or magic panels or anything in between. It's only when you synthesize do you have to cough up money. This is unlike any other game with synthesis where the process is free so long as you BYOSM, that's bring your own synth materials, and not an AO3 tag for Beast and Zald and Smut. I interpret this as some sort of service fee because unlike the other in-person Moogles who we see operating shops throughout the series, Gulmex has no infrastructure or even regular structures, not even like a pot of glue like in Chain of Memories. So it's probably harder to forge a bunch of stuff when all you've got with you is the adorable coat on your back. Did you notice how I answered Gibble's question really easily and early, and now I've tripped so deep down this Wonderlandian rabbit hole I need fucking life alert? I've fallen and I can't get up? No, I will not get up until I'm satisfied. Of course, we also need to consider those previously mentioned Moogle points in Chain of Memories, which I always found especially strange. Given that Calm was only the second game in the series, it seemed possible that a game's currency type could have potentially been something different with each installment until the market stabilized in late 2005 and money was once again the currency of choice. But of all games to shift to a completely different currency, Calm is a weird candidate considering most of the game is a memory-based recreation of Sora's first journey. Which, if you weren't paying attention earlier because you're doom scrolling in another tab, stop doing that. Sora did not harvest red balls in KH1. So either Naminé really did not pay attention when she got down to the memory manipulation, or my personal theory, Chain of Memories is the first example of the Moogle X organization partnership predating Ghoulmex in the Castle That Never Was. And in fact, in universe, COM takes place concurrently with Days, so we may just be in the midst of witnessing this fiscal alliance. Perhaps we should consider that the Moogle room cards aren't based on memory at all, and these rooms hold actual living Moogles who have an agreement with the organization that permits them to do business within Castle Oblivion. And because Castle Oblivion limits all who enter it to solely using cards for combat, which the game never explains, I think the intent here was for the organization to have access to these Moogles to help build up their own decks. They probably got some starter cards when they first showed up, just like Sora did, but there's no way Axel was able to do that firewall slate right from the jump. Of course, I think the organization overlooked part of their contract with the Moogles because nothing in the fine print prevents the Moogles from selling to Sora as well. They're playing both sides, so they always come out on top. Now we need to consider why Castle Oblivion is the only place in the entire franchise that produces Moogle points instead of money. And frankly, the only logical conclusion is that the Land of Departure is the Moogles' original homeland. I don't even know what fucking genre this video is anymore, but listen. We know so little about the Land of Departure, we don't know if it's always existed, who it was founded by, if literally anyone other than TVA and Ericus have lived there, so we're filling in the backstory here. And no, I'm not blind to the fact that Moogles existed in Daybreak Town during the Union Cross era, and that they used money, but that doesn't mean that they were there first, or that the Land of Departure didn't exist prior to or concurrently with Daybreak Town. Anyway, Moogles and thus Moogle points are native to the Land of Departure, that much is obvious. Sure, we never saw the latter when we had the chance to explore the Land of Departure in Birth by Sleep, but we weren't exactly around for a very long time, nor was there anything to hit and produce Moogle points from. So, fast forward through the game, yada yada yada, Aqua transforms the LOD into CO, and so the structures and projections that exist within the castle's walls are still imbued with Moogle energy. And so the Moogles who struck a deal with the organization, the new governing body in this world that was previously inhabited by the humans who many years ago drove the original Moogles off of this planet, are looking to harvest the Moogle points that their ancestors once held dear. And it's possible that this wasn't even their own currency back in the day, or that they even called them Moogle points. These could be edible delicacies, shedded pom-poms, who knows? All that matters is the Moogles have access to card-making technology, so it's no skin off their big red noses to trade them for the points collected by Sora and the organization. Now, you may be wondering why Riku is unable to collect points or interact with the Moogles during his campaign. Moving on, as I was working on this project, a few of my patrons speculated what the purpose of medals are in locations like the BBS Mirage Arena or Dream Drop's Flick Rush Coliseum. And I think this is actually really refreshingly simple. Medals are literally just arcade tickets. You spend real money, in this case money with a U, to acquire this fake currency that's only good in this one specific establishment. In the case of BBS, you pour your actual money into commands, investing in making your character strong enough to tackle arena challenges, and eventually getting a return by way of medals. Same thing for DDD. You spend real money on training tools for your Dream Eaters, and then you pit them against opposing teams for a chance to earn medals. Then you can buy stuff with those medals, like exclusive commands, or pencil toppers, now and later candies, an off-brand Gengar plush, or a neon sign that says Gamer Zone that dies after being on for like 20 minutes. I think now is when we have the difficult conversation of how badly the economy was doing during Kingdom Hearts 1. And it really pains me to say that as someone who is deeply KH1-pilled and would choose to live in that game if I could Bluesky into any piece of fiction. Sure, the apocalypse is ongoing, but like, the vibes, you know? But yes, unfortunately, things were not going well economically during the events of KH1. Granted, we only know this by looking at the games that take place before and after KH1. At the time, we just thought this was the way of the world. Of course, it depends on which at the time we're talking about, because again, there were pretty dramatic changes between the original release of KH1 and Final Mix. I consider Final Mix the canon version of the game, as the series itself does, so I consider the Final Mix economy to be the canon economy. But for the sake of comparison, in original KH1, a potion cost a measly 25 money, which would have been the second lowest potion price across the entire series, if not for Final Mix, which jacked the price up to 60. To compare, in KH2 and 3, a potion costs 40 money, and in Birth by Sleep, it costs only 30. The same goes for high potions, most expensive in KH1, less expensive in 2 and 3, and cheapest in BBS. Now, ethers are the only other item that's sold in all 4 of these games, costing 200 in KH1, 120 in KH2, 200 in KH3, but only 50 in BBS. Granted, they're like the least useful in BBS because they straight up had a different function. For the record, in both versions of KH1, when selling healing items, you always get only 20% of the item's buy value back. So potions sell for 12 money in Final Mix and a pathetic 5 money in the OG. KH2 and 3, and while we're at it, Recoded and Dream Drop are a bit more generous, giving you 25% back on a sale. And once again, BBS was a great time to be a consumer and, in this case, a regurgitator, because you got 50% of an item's value back upon selling. These percentages only apply to healing items, however, and things like Donald and Goofy weapons have their own rules. In KH1, some weapons abide by the 20% rule, but others give you even less back, and sometimes the sellback percentages are different between versions. For example, the Magus Staff is a Donald weapon that can be bought for 1,000 money and sold back for 100 in the OG release, and bought for 1,200 and sold for 200 in Final Mix. So that's a 10% resale value and a 16.67% resale value, respectively. Some weapons like the Grand Mallet or Wisdom Staff can be bought for 4,000 money in both versions, but have different selling prices. So I don't know what to really make of that, but now you know about it too. KH2 and 3 are much more consistent, with weapons always selling back for half their price in KH2 and 25% in KH3. I should also point out, when dealing with games and item categories where there are consistent pricing trends, we can essentially figure out how much items like Mega Ethers or Mega Elixirs would cost if item shops actually sold them. The former is only purchasable in Birth by Sleep, and the latter in BBS and Recoded. So, for example, Mega Elixirs can be sold by the player for 100 money in KH1, and considering healing items are always sold back at 20% of the original value, we can assume that the Duck Nephews, if they had superior supply chains, would hypothetically sell Mega Elixirs for 500 money apiece. Anyway, I fell into a sort of math tangent there, and not the sine-cosine kind. Point being, why is everything so fucking expensive in KH1, or rather KH1 Final Mix? In fact, why the price increases between versions at all? To be honest, I can't really figure out a good reason. There's a few instances of Final Mix being a bit more generous than the original with giving the player more money, but not really substantial enough to justify this price gouging. For example, the Traverse Town crew gives you 500 money to start off with in Final Mix, as opposed to the 100 you're given in the OG. Unlike most other items, Pretty Stones sell for more in Final Mix, specifically 100 instead of the original 30. Of course, unless you beat Riku in the race a bunch of times, there's only 4 Pretty Stones in the entire game, 2 being an End of the World, so not like those will be a huge boon to your finances. Even the rare arts items from the White Mushrooms took a hit, originally selling for 250 and now selling for 100. The Mystery Mold drop from the Black Fungus is an even more egregious price drop, originally selling for 9,999 until being changed to just 3,000. On top of that, the Jackpot ability, which increases the amount of money and other prizes dropped by enemies, is learned later in Final Mix than in the OG, considerably later in some cases. Here's a chart of when Sora learns it depending on which weapon he picks in the tutorial and in which version. As you can see, the Dream Rod gap isn't too big, but the Sword gap is just cruel, a 37 level difference. To make matters even more poverty-stricken, Donald also learns the ability 4 levels later in Final Mix. But alas, this is the world we canonically live in, and it's bleak. But, you know, it kinda makes sense. KH1 came out in 2002, and thus it obviously takes place in 2002, so the world is still recovering from the dot-com bubble burst and global markets being disrupted by 9/11. Of course, Birth by Sleep takes place 10 years prior to 2002, so 1992, and obviously things were cheaper then. It's the 90s, everything was better. And naturally, considering KH2 and 3 took place a year after KH1, 2003, the economy had begun to stabilize again, inflation was a bit more under control, maybe, unemployment was up, or down, I don't know, I pulled all of that out of my ass. Like, I'm Turk and everything I just said is this gummy block I laid on the jungle floor. Although, in-universe, I suppose it still makes sense why things are so pricey in KH1 compared to other games. If you think about it, the worlds are the most imminently threatened in the first game. Sure, there are evil forces at work in other entries, but we have that aforementioned apocalypse going on here. Worlds are being actively threatened and consumed by the Heartless, so times are beyond tough. Supply chains are probably affected pretty dramatically when the import or exporter fucking collapses in on itself. Once the existential threat to the worlds is stopped, we see prices lower, although not to the extent of the golden age of Birth by Sleep, where not even Heartless or nobodies were running amok. The Unversed were such a recent factor in that game, the markets hardly had any time to react to their presence. And even then, they weren't eating entire planets, they were pests who spent a bulk of their time harassing young girls. Disturbing, yes. Economically impactful, not as much. But for the record, Birth by Sleep is not the most inexpensive era of Kingdom Hearts. That honor actually goes to Dream Drop Distance, where potions cost 20 to BBS's 30. High potions cost half as much, 40 compared to BBS's 80. The one exception of something being more expensive in DDD is elixirs, which cost 2,400 money apiece, but they're not even available for purchase unless the bargain flurry weather is active. Yeah, DDD had weather, remember that? Why is it that dream drop prices are so low? Well, this game takes place in the sleeping worlds, dreams. And what kind of self-loathing loser would dream about price hikes? It's a dream world, of course things are cheap. It's also the only game where sales are even a thing. Real Moogles would never allow something like that to happen. On the flip side, we have the true most expensive KH game, and that dubious distinction goes to Recoded. The game itself wasn't the most expensive. I'm pretty sure it went for like 40 or 50 bucks when it came out. Still too high, but I digress. Besides elixirs, every healing item is most expensive in Recoded. A massive 120 money for a potion, double that of KH1 Final Mix. But the bulk of these recoded worlds are just the worlds Sora explored in KH1 in digitized journal form, so what gives? Well, the culprit here is obviously one James Cricket. There's a few explanations here. Either Jiminy is sort of flanderizing the KH1 economic experience, highlighting how outrageous the prices were for the sake of hyperbole. Or maybe the Bugman wasn't paying a ton of attention during supply trips and Jiminy is just extremely out of touch, a real Lucille Bluth. I mean, it's one banana, Sora. How much could it cost? 120 money? Speaking of food, and I foreshadowed this a bit at the top of the vid, can we talk about these menu prices? Food is, at least to me, a strangely fascinating subject in the Kingdom Hearts universe. I mean, we hardly ever see anyone eat anything. Granted, the Days trio alone has tanked several Mr. Softy trucks of sea salt ice cream. Ice cream is also enjoyed in Radiant Garden, Disney Town, and San Francisco. In the end of Dream Drop, SDG are ostensibly eating cake and pastries, although we never actually see them do so. Of course, you've got takeout boxes lying around several KH3 worlds, and the bistro is basically the culinary hub of the universe. All this to say, yes, people do eat food in this series even if it's not often shown. At first blush, these Traverse Town menu prices seem pretty crazy. Mayor Leon said he would lower the price of bottled drinks, but no word on that yet. But these prices are really only offensive if we think about them in relation to US dollars. And these prices are obviously not based on Japanese currency, since a basic meal typically would run around 1,000 yen, if not more. So these are money prices, once again, money with a U. A potion that restores your fighting spirit, or stamina, or whatever you want to call it, that's 60. Several baked potatoes is 80. A whole pizza is 90. Not too bad if you really think about it. And to bring it back to the bistro, things actually feel pretty reasonably consistent with these food prices from KH1. Sure, even your most basic meals cost more than the highest priced items at the Traverse Cafe, but you're also getting food from a world-class rat chef at a multi-star restaurant. I am once again assuming the Moogles cut a deal with Scrooge to sell takeout at various locations, with the bistro receiving a healthy cut of the profits. But hey, some hot dogs from a random cafe for 85 money versus crab bisque for 240, it kinda works out. Of course, KH2 throws a real fucking Abu wrench into things, because what do you mean watermelons cost 2,000 money apiece? And the implication that pretzels could be around 300 apiece? How could this happen? I was racking my brain trying to figure out this inconsistency. Surely it couldn't be that the devs didn't think about making these prices relatively consistent across 17 years of releases. I mean, Hayner said they're like 2,000 apiece, so maybe he's exaggerating. Like, it's Hayner, he's not the most reliable source.
This is unprecedented!
But then it hit me. It hit me like that tram hit Goofy. This isn't the real Twilight Town, it's the simulated one. Who made this place? Bougie-ass Ansem the Fool, former king of a nation, town, planet thing. He doesn't know what the common folk eat or how much it costs. Once again, another Lucille Bluth.
I mean, it's one watermelon, Riku. How much could it cost? 2,000 money?
Which brings us to money itself. Not to get silly in this video, but what is money? I don't mean what is it used for, I mean like, what is the stuff, and where does it truly come from? Why and how is it somehow this universally accepted currency across the entire, well, universe? The simplest answer is that because of all of the worlds being connected back in the day, money was the established currency, and it's still a consistent held-over element even after the worlds were separated. Although, is it truly still a currency in all of the worlds we've visited? Sure, things and creatures release money in all sorts of very different worlds, but there's a relatively small amount of worlds and entities who we see treat money as currency. To start, in KH1, there's actually only 4 unique places where you can buy or sell things. the item shop, the accessory shop, the gummy shop, and one other place. I'll let you think about that one for a bit. But as you can see, Traverse Town is basically the economic hub of the first game. And Traverse Town is obviously a bit unique considering it's part refugee planet, part lucrative business opportunity if you're a grandnephew of Scrooge McDuck. Point being, everyone taking part in commerce here shares something in common, which is their knowledge of there being other worlds. In KH2, in-person shopping only occurs in Original Worlds, Twilight Town, and Radiant Garden, with the rest of your commercial needs being fulfilled by way of holographic Moogle stores. In BBS, shopping is facilitated almost entirely through Moogles, we'll get to that almost in a bit, and KH3 limits in-person shopping to Twilight Town, once again granting access to Moogle holograms across the different worlds. So it would seem as if the use of money as currency is only ever observed when dealing with characters who are aware of other worlds. There's a bit of a question mark on that though, because it's not entirely clear if characters like Jesse and Biggs of Twilight Town are cognizant of their world not being the only planet out there. You would think by KH3 that the Twitowners might recognize that Scrooge McDuck was definitely not born here, so who knows. HPO may have spilled the beans because they definitely know about other worlds. Man, I've gotten off track here. What I'm trying to say, to put it bluntly, is that outside of Moogle holograms, you almost only ever exchange money for goods in, frankly, worlds that matter. Original worlds like Traverse Town, Radiant Garden, and Twilight Town. There's an exception here in that you can buy things from the Duck Nephews in Disney Town using money, but there's something of a special case. Some, if not all, of the Disney Towners know about other worlds, and we know that Scrooge and Mickey worked on setting up a gummy highway to connect worlds prior to KH1. Scrooge is from Disney Town, yet appears in Radiant Garden in BBS, so it's not the craziest thing that his nephews also know about money and other worlds. In fact, they say themselves that they're saving up money to go on a trip. And that's where that mystery fourth shopping spot from KH1 comes in. The one and only Disney character that you can buy from and sell to, who also exists in a Disney world, who also does not know about other worlds, the goddamn peddler. This is like a level 1 or 2 iceberg KH1 fact, so you may or may not already know this, but for limited periods of time during your first visit to Agrabah, the peddler shows up in Aladdin's house and acts as a shop for reasons. Nothing equivalent to this happens in any other world, and by the time you're playing through Agrabah, you have a warp gummy, so it's not even a hassle to get back to Traverse Town to stock up on items like it was for the first 3 worlds. Frankly, this would have been much more useful in worlds like Wonderland or Deep Jungle. Tantor should show up in the bamboo thicket to sell me potions. Regardless, this guy is from Agrabah, has never left Agrabah, knows nothing beyond Agrabah, and he trades in money. Again, if money is just a remnant of Union Cross times, I suppose this is not really in need of explanation, but it's definitely odd that this is the one exception to the pseudo-rule we've established. Well, to be fair, that's the hard exception, but there are some soft exceptions too. In KH3, there are cash registers and toy box that release money when struck, and residents of Port Royal and COVID towns throw out money when Sora does some street performing. So it would seem that in those worlds, money is, at the bare minimum, something of value, if not explicitly currency. Sure, money being inside cash registers might prove that it's used as currency in that world, but I don't know, why are there bottle caps in these pre-war cash registers across the Mojave? We can't just assume, as fun as it may be to be an ass. So in those cases, money could be something else of value, or a means of expressing appreciation or celebration, trinkets, or something akin to confetti. So if we're working under the theory that money is not being explicitly used as currency in worlds like Toy Box, Royal, or Rona, and if we also don't feel comfortable with the idea that money has remained the universal currency since Union Cross times, that still leaves the matter of the peddler. A character from a non-original world who has never left it, who is clearly exchanging goods for money and vice versa. But the peddler is Genie. I mean, this is again some high-level iceberg shit, but there's this common fan theory that the peddler and the Genie are one and the same. It was actually confirmed by folks at Disney that this was going to be made more explicitly clear in the movie, but the final cut just left breadcrumbs of the idea. You might be saying, wait, but unlike the movie, Genie and the peddler are active participants in the story at the same time. Well, yes, but also no. They only share one scene together in KH2, but they're never seen on screen at the same time. In fact, as the peddler is running away from Pete, he bonks into a wall, which seemingly even triggers the appearance of the real Genie. And then the peddler is nowhere to be found for the rest of the scene. Not to mention, the Genie has phenomenal cosmic powers. He could also literally just be in 2 places at once anyway. Why does any of this matter? Because Genie fucking knows things. Him and King Triton, they're these weird KH-1 anomalies who have knowledge of keyblades and keyholes. They existed concurrently with the worlds being connected, and so Genie, aka the Peddler, knows that money was and is the currency of folks who know about other worlds. I rest my goddamn case. Of course, we still haven't actually answered what money is. Regardless of whether or not every denizen of every world recognizes it as currency, why is money so ubiquitous across the KH universe? It's not like there's some universal mint that's printing the stuff out into gummy space, or at least I don't think there is. The problem with money is how it can be obtained from so many different sources. The first method of money accruement you probably think of is killing enemies. But there's also the aforementioned whacking of objects, receiving it from other characters, or picking it up off the fucking floor like in the Caribbean, which, yeah, how do we solve that? Why is there money mixed in with these 1700s era gold pieces? Either there just happens to be money lying amongst the doubloons, or maybe we're seeing, or rather not seeing, some off-screen truncated currency conversion taking place for the sake of streamlining. Sora scoops up a handful of coins and Moogle evaluates them as being worth X amount of money, and we just don't see that whole process because this is, in case you've forgotten, a video game. Now, circling back to how money is traditionally acquired, we also have to consider how folks like the Twilight Town merchants have money at all. Because in the case of a world that is more often than not peaceful, it wouldn't make sense for its residents to exclusively get money from slaying monsters. And we know that you can get money from just hitting stuff out in the field, but is that the only way a person in a place like Twilight Town can find money during peacetime? I would think no, because is that renewable? In the context of a video game it is. Hit this trash can or box, get money, leave the area, come back, hit it again, get more money. But I don't think that's how Bob from Tram Common makes a living. Maybe he kills bees in back alleys or destroys piles of junk, but when people pay Bob, where did they get the money from? The only conclusion I've managed to reach, and I regretfully am not even fucking kidding, is that money is imbued in the very fabric of the KH universe. It's something akin to a periodic element. It just is. It's something that appears in nature in just the perfect amount of abundance to be used as currency. Not too rare, not too common. I think it's reasonable to assume, so long as we're okay with being asses, that things like money mines, or money farms, or money fishing, or other analogous methods of obtaining money are possible, and just not something we've encountered. But money also isn't like strictly something equivalent to a mineral or plant because it's dropped by creatures when they're slain, but not all creatures. Like, is it something that can potentially appear in an entity's DNA, the money-dropping gene? Do any completed beings, people like a Goofy or Riku, drop money when they expire? Xehanort and Clayton didn't seem to leave any pocket change behind when they kicked the bucket, so maybe it is exclusive to monster-like creatures. I think money could be some sort of manifestation of light itself, some kind of expression being made by the capital W world. I mean, it's got that pale yellow hue to it, it's pretty light reminiscent. I suppose it's a bit depressing if money is like truly intertwined with any and everything in this universe's reality, but damn if that ain't just a commentary on how we do be living in a society. Lastly, and I doubt this surprises anyone, I like how money looked in KH1 better than how it looks now. And that's it. There is no sweeping conclusive statement to make because, if you haven't noticed, I'm just spitballing here. But there you go, I've thought about money with the U more than potentially anyone else in the hopes of making some money with an O. And like and subscribe, please.